The silk curtains were drawn, not to conceal, but to sanctify what came next. In the palace's inner chambers, the scent of camellia oil clung to the air, sweet, cloying, indifferent. Then came the sound, not screams, not commands, but the low, rhythmic squelch of flesh meeting iron. The bodies did not simply die, they were erased, limbs severed, faces peeled, tongues cut out mid-curse. Lu Ji, the Empress Dowager, did not flinch. She watched, she studied. She ensured that every fragment of the woman who once rivaled her, Consort Qi, would be dissolved into a legend so horrific that memory itself would cower. This was not vengeance, it was legacy. Because in the early Han Dynasty, death was not the end, it was a message. Why tell this story now of a woman who ruled from behind a screen and killed without raising her voice? Because Lu Ji is more than a footnote in the chronicles of ancient China. She was the first woman to wield imperial power in her own right during the Han Dynasty. And she did so not through seduction or inheritance, but through terror, calculation, and timing. But history remembers her as a shadow, Empress Dowager, regent, wife of Gaozu. The names of her victims, like Consort Qi and Prince Ruyi, echo faintly, if at all. Their deaths are often dismissed as court intrigue, necessary consolidation. Yet when we look closer, we see something else, a slow descent from strategic brilliance into moral abyss. A woman surrounded by fragile men, forced to navigate a court that viewed her body as political property. A mother who would mutilate a child to protect her own. A ruler who believed memory was as dangerous as blood. This is not the tale of a villain. It is the anatomy of power when love curdles into obsession and survival becomes a curse. What remains of Lu Ji is not her voice, but the hollow echo that followed her footsteps, an absence louder than memory. Long before she held a dagger beneath her robe, Lu Ji was a farmer's daughter. Born around 241 BCE in Shanfu, a modest village in Shanxi, her childhood was shaped by two forces, hunger and hierarchy. The land was harsh, the winters unkind, and food was not a right but a negotiation. Her father, Lu Wen, rose through military service, eventually gaining minor noble status. Even with her father's new title, Lu Ji learned early that her value was not her own. It was a coin, traded in service of other men's ambitions. She married Liu Bang not out of love, but out of arrangement. He was crude, magnetic, ambitious. She was silent, watchful. When he left to chase rebellion against the Qin dynasty, she remained behind, raising their son, enduring humiliation, and learning the quiet art of endurance. When Liu Bang returned victorious and became Emperor Gaozu, Lu Ji was named Empress. But by then, the man she married had changed. He surrounded himself with concubines. He elevated Consort Qi, a younger, more charming rival, and favored Qi's son, Ruyi, over his own. For Lu Ji, the betrayal was not merely personal, it was existential. She had survived the hunger of childhood, the humiliation of political marriage, the loneliness of power deferred. But now she faced erasure, from her husband, from the court, from history itself. Her weapon would not be poison or blade. It would be memory. She began to weave her web, binding allies, observing weakness, learning who flinched and who lied. She smiled at Consort Qi. She sent gifts to Ruyi. She waited. The scarred tissue of her early life had hardened into something else, not cruelty, but clarity. In a world that offered her no softness, she would become sharper than any sword. Not yet a killer, but no longer a wife. Only a future reckoning, dressed in silk. Consort Qi believed she had won. The emperor adored her, the court admired her beauty, and her son was poised to become heir. But Lu Ji had outlived emperors and eclipsed lovers. She did not shout, She did not plead. She simply waited until love became absence, and absence became power. And then, one by one, the doors began to close. When Emperor Gaozu died in 195 BCE, Lu Ji stepped forward, not as widow, but as regent. Her son, Liu Ying, now Emperor Hui, was gentle, malleable, and terrified. He ruled in name. She ruled in practice. The court was no longer a theater of ritual. It was a chessboard. Every minister, eunuch, and general became a piece to be moved or removed. But power did not soothe her. It splintered her. Lu Ji had won the game, yet the shadow of Consort Qi lingered. The former concubine still lived within the palace walls, soft-voiced and poised, her son Ruyi growing older, bolder. Ministers whispered that he resembled the late emperor more than Liu Ying did. Soldiers admired him. Some even called him the true prince. To Lu Ji, it was not a threat. It was an infection. An infection had to be cut out. She summoned Prince Ruyi under the guise of familial affection, but before he arrived in the capital, his escort was changed. Poisoned wine was offered. When that failed, a blade finished what diplomacy could not. Consort Qi was next. Lu Ji did not kill her swiftly. She did something colder. She unmade her. Locked in a dark chamber, Qi was shaved, shackled, and disfigured. Her tongue was severed to prevent last-minute persuasion. Her arms and legs were removed. She was referred to only as the human pig, a grotesque living warning. And yet Lu Ji did not hide this from her son. She led Emperor Hui to the chamber and forced him to look. He wept, he screamed, he collapsed, and something in Lu Ji did too. Because in that moment, the mother and the regent collapsed into one another. Her power was total, and yet it had cost her the one thread of love still binding her to life. From that day on, Emperor Hui turned to wine and silence, leaving governance entirely to his mother. Lu Ji had secured her throne. But the woman inside her, the daughter, the wife, perhaps even the mother, was gone. All that remained was the architect of silence. She had removed every rival, dismantled every lineage but her own. Yet the corridors of the palace grew quieter, colder. Whispers no longer spoke her name. They paused when her shadow passed. Even loyalty began to taste like fear, and still, Lu Ji ruled. But death was approaching, not hers yet, but one more reckoning, crueler than flesh or steel. The last rays of daylight slipped through the lattice windows, slipping over the lacquered floor. The courtyard lanterns, still unlit, cast long shadows against the stone, silent sentinels to what was to come. Lu Ji's hand hovered over the silk rope that bound her next victim. She inhaled the cool, metallic scent of the blade at her side, an instrument of both law and retribution. She did not tremble. Her breath was measured. Outside, the muted footfalls of palace eunuchs echoed. Inside, in the central hall, stood the final living reminder of what she had built and what she feared. A lone man, Liu Ying, her son, her emperor, the last heir of the dynasty. His clothes were immaculate, his posture regal, yet his eyes were repositories of exhaustion, guilt, and fear. She called him forth. He obeyed. He moved with deliberate slowness, as though each step weighed his very soul. As he approached her throne, the silk curtains behind them swayed with a faint breeze, each fold a silent witness to the blood spilled in their name. They faced one another. It began without words. She lifted the blade, not toward her son, but toward the veil between them. One clean stroke split the curtain. The fabric snapped open with a sound like breaking bone. For a heartbeat, the two figures were half visible, half hidden, mother and mother instruction on the throne, child and shadow stepping free. She drew the curtains entirely aside, revealing the expansive courtyard beyond. There stood the severed, shamed remains of her rivals, dry, bleached, catalogued in rows, faces distorted even in death, limbs arrayed as trophies. The air above them shimmered with the dust of their mutilation, glittering in the fading light. Not corpses, they were warnings. Liu Ying's expression cracked. He swallowed hard. The palace air tasted of ash and regret. A single cricket ground its wings in the distance, a calm metronome to horror. Lu Ji spoke, her voice a whisper that carried like thunder. Remember. It was both command and absolution, not just to him, but to the stones, the shadows, the empire itself. He stepped toward the display. His fingers brushed a severed hand, light, almost tender. He recoiled as if burned. The blade in Lu Ji's hand glinted, hers, not his. In that courtyard, light and dark, mother and regent, life and death, intertwined. He collapsed to his knees, tears sliding in silent rivulets down his pale cheeks. She did not move to comfort him, not mother, not sovereign. She simply stood, framed against the ruin she had shaped, still, sharp, unyielding. In that moment, the blade's promise stretched beyond mortality. It was not simply the instrument of an execution, it was the architect of a legacy, a testament to who wielded power in Han and at what cost. He spoke finally, his voice hollow. All I know is the silence. A confession, an indictment, a requiem. She turned her gaze outward over the courtyard floor that shimmered with dark stains. The lanterns flickered on, as if summoned by the weight of memory. In their light, her face became unreadable. She stepped back into the shadows behind the throne. The silk curtains closed again, seal upon the spectacle. And for a long moment, only the night listened. Lu Ji died in 180 BCE, her body wrapped in imperial silk, her title intact, Empress Dowager, Grand Matriarch of Han. But titles lie. Within a year of her death, her clan was annihilated, massacred by rival factions seeking to reclaim balance or vengeance or simply opportunity. Her son died young, poisoned by grief or drink. Her enemies, those who still had names, returned from the edges of silence to reshape the court. The horrors she orchestrated were quietly omitted from state records. History, ever polite to victors, called her reign stable. But behind the ritual phrases, something lingers. Because Lu Ji understood something that few rulers dared admit. Power is not sustained by love or laws. It endures through fear, forgetting, and spectacle. She did not merely destroy her rivals, she hollowed them out until they became symbols. And yet, in doing so, she became one too. Not mother, not wife, not villain, not hero, but a mirror held up to every regime that survives by what it hides, to every generation that chooses silence over reckoning. Her legacy is not her tomb, nor her title. It is the question she leaves us with. How many stories have we buried beneath silk? She ruled with silence. She died surrounded by shadows. And yet, what echoes louder, her cruelty or the void she left behind? Was Lu Ji a monster shaped by circumstance, or a survivor who became what the empire demanded of her? What would you protect if history tried to erase you? And when memory becomes a weapon, whose story gets to survive? Tell me, what would you protect if history tried to erase you? Was her brutality a betrayal of motherhood, or its final, terrifying expression?